9 years ago, I stood outside my parents' beautiful house with tears streaming down my face, holding the hand of the man I had chosen to marry. My mother stood at the doorway, furious and heartbroken, while my father remained behind her with his arms crossed. They had never accepted my fiancé, because he worked as a janitor and had almost no money. To them, he was beneath our family. They had already chosen a wealthy man for me, someone they believed could give me a luxurious life and increase our family's social status. But they never understood what I saw in the man beside me. He had never treated me like a possession or judged people by their bank accounts. He worked long hours, came home exhausted, and still found a way to make me smile. When my family demanded that I choose between him and them, I chose him. My mother's final words that night broke my heart. "If you leave with him, don't ever come back." I walked away anyway. Our wedding was simple. There was no expensive ballroom, no giant guest list, and no one from my family sitting in the front row. We married with a few close friends beside us and began our life together in a tiny apartment. The first few years were difficult. We counted every dollar, shared one old car, and sometimes had to postpone things we wanted because rent and groceries came first. But despite everything, I never regretted my decision. My husband worked harder than anyone I had ever known. He never complained about cleaning other people's offices because he believed honest work was honorable. When I lost my job, he supported me. When I became sick, he stayed beside me. When life became difficult, he never blamed me. Slowly, things began to change. He became a supervisor at the cleaning company, and eventually, we started a small property maintenance business together. We worked for years, saved carefully, and finally bought a comfortable home. We were not extremely wealthy, but we were happy, independent, and proud of what we had built. 9 years passed without a single visit from my parents. I stopped expecting their calls. I stopped wondering whether they regretted their decision. I had learned to live without them. Then one rainy evening, someone knocked on our front door. When I opened it, my heart stopped. My mother was standing there. She looked older, tired, and nervous. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. She looked past me at the home my husband and I had built, then looked back at me. "We need to talk," she whispered. I didn't know what she wanted, but something about the look in her eyes told me that she hadn't come simply to apologize. I invited my mother inside, and she sat at our dining table while my husband quietly brought her a cup of tea. I kept waiting for her to say the words I had dreamed about hearing for 9 years. I thought maybe she had finally come to apologize for abandoning me. Instead, she opened her handbag and placed a folder on the table. "Your father's business is in serious trouble," she said. I stared at her in disbelief. She explained that my father had made several terrible financial decisions, taken on enormous debts, and now the family home was in danger of being taken by creditors. Then she looked at me and said, "We need your help." I asked what she meant, although I already knew. She told me that my husband's business was doing well and asked me to convince him to give my father a large loan. For a moment, I couldn't speak. 9 years ago, they had told me that my husband was worthless because he had been a janitor. Now they were sitting in my home asking the man they had rejected for money. "You told me I wasn't your daughter anymore," I reminded her. My mother looked down. "People say things when they're angry," she replied. "No," I said quietly. "You meant them." The room became silent. Then my husband walked in and immediately understood that something was wrong. My mother explained the situation again and asked him for the money. Instead of getting angry, he calmly asked how much they needed. When she told him the amount, I was shocked. It was far more than I expected. My husband thought for a moment and then said, "We can try to help, but we won't risk our home." My mother looked surprised. She had probably expected him to refuse completely, or perhaps remind her of everything she had done. But he didn't. He simply said that he wanted to find a solution that would help my father without destroying what we had worked so hard to build. Then my mother revealed something that changed the entire situation. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Your father doesn't know I came here." I asked why. She opened the folder and pulled out a medical document. My father had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition months earlier. He had refused to tell me because his pride wouldn't allow him to admit that the daughter he had disowned might be the person who could help him. My anger slowly turned into sadness. My mother began crying. "We were wrong," she said. "We thought money made people valuable. We thought your husband was beneath you because he cleaned floors. We couldn't see what kind of man he really was." I looked at my husband. He didn't say anything. He simply held my hand. Then my mother made one final request. "Please come home and see your father." A few days later, I stood outside my parents' house for the first time in 9 years. The same house where my mother had once told me never to return suddenly felt completely different. I walked inside and found my father sitting near the window. He looked older and weaker than I remembered. When he saw me, his eyes immediately filled with tears. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. Then he whispered, "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I sat beside him and held his hand. "Maybe you don't," I said gently, "but you deserve a chance to make things right." My father began to cry. He apologized for judging my husband by his job, for caring more about money than my happiness, and for allowing his pride to destroy our relationship. He admitted that the man he had called a failure had become more successful through hard work than many of the wealthy people he once admired. My husband and I agreed to help, but we didn't simply hand over a huge amount of money. Instead, we worked with financial professionals to help my father restructure his business and manage his debts responsibly. My husband even used his experience in property maintenance to help my father improve part of the company. He never once reminded my father how badly he had treated him. He never demanded an apology in return. He simply helped because he believed helping someone in trouble was the right thing to do. Slowly, my father's health and business situation improved. My mother began visiting our home regularly. This time, she didn't come asking for money. She brought food. She helped around the house. She asked about our lives. She was finally trying to become the mother she should have been 9 years earlier. One afternoon, I watched my husband repairing a fence in our backyard while my mother stood beside me. She looked at him for a long moment and smiled sadly. "I once thought you married a broke janitor," she said. I smiled softly. "You did?" She shook her head. "No, I was wrong. You married a good man." My eyes filled with tears because those simple words meant more than she could ever understand. 9 years earlier, my family believed I had destroyed my future by choosing a man without money. They thought love would leave me with nothing. They were wrong. That man had stood beside me when I had lost everything. He had worked honestly, loved me faithfully, and helped me build a life I could be proud of. I finally realized that I hadn't lost my family when I walked away 9 years ago. I had simply discovered that family isn't always determined by blood, wealth, or status. Sometimes family is the person who stays when everyone else leaves. And sometimes the greatest reward in life is choosing someone for their heart when the world tells you to choose them for their money.